After playing the demo for Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven fairly recently, I was so ready to get stuck into the final game. And thanks to Square Enix, I've had the opportunity to do so, and so welcome to my review of Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven, as I've gone on a bit of a roller coaster with this game. To quickly catch you up on what Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven is, it's a remake of the 1993 original Super Famicom game Romancing Saga 2. In Romancing Saga 2, the 7 heroes of legend, which are named for Revenge of the Seven of course, come back after thousands of years of being spoken about in legend and actually turn out to be evil, and so you take the role of Leon, the king at the beginning of the game, and his lineage as the game progresses, trying to take revenge on the Seven, as it were, whilst also discovering what made them how they are now to begin with. In a classic turn-based combat system of the JRPGs of old, you will be going through what's known as the freeform scenario system, where you choose the order in which you want to tackle all of the quests that are at hand and locate the 7 heroes in order to take them down in any order. And the way that you progress through the game is extremely open-ended, to a point where I actually kind of found it overwhelming at times. Those of you who follow my channel for a while know that I'm not the biggest fan of the Saga franchise up until this point. I've bounced off numerous games in the franchise up until now, and I can quite happily tell you that this is by far the most cohesive Saga game I've ever tried. It's very well presented, and as a big fan of scene games, having played the Trials of Mana remake, I love the way they present remakes, particularly of the Super Nintendo or Super Famicom era. It's charming, it's not the most technically proficient visuals I've ever seen, but for what it is, it presents itself really, really well. The music is wonderful, if a little repetitive at times. Like, there are some really good tracks within Romancing Saga 2, but you'll find that you're going to hear the same ones an awful lot. If you've ever played any of the Saga games, you'll know that they have a very interesting approach to combat and progression, taking its origins from Final Fantasy II, then becoming Final Fantasy Legend as a spin-off, which then became the Saga franchise. Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven absolutely runs with this premise, and so you want to expect to fight a lot because of the way progression works. Instead of having a level system like you would expect in a normal JRPG, this is actually more Western in style. Think Skyrim, that kind of game where the more you do something like attack with a sword or use fire magic, you'll get stronger at using those particular ways of fighting. Your positions within your party and party formation actually play a really big role in this as well. Similar to Star Ocean Second Story R, if you've played that. For example, you will have a cross formation where the character at the back will take less damage and is less likely to get targeted, whereas the character at the front is more likely to get targeted and take more damage. So you have to kind of manipulate how your party works with regards to how you want them to participate in fights. Speaking of those fights, Saga is difficult. It's well known for being difficult. All Saga games are challenging in some way or another. And I actually had to turn the difficulty down to get anywhere near where I wanted to in the game for this review, which makes me want to turn it back up if I go back to the game again at a later date. As a matter of fact, the hard difficulty in the remake is closer to the classic difficulty from the Super Nintendo era, whereas the normal difficulty is definitely more streamlined to a newer audience, which is what I think that Revenge of the Seven is trying to achieve by bringing new players into the Saga franchise as a whole. Romancing Saga 2 is not small either. There's a ton of content, there's lots to do. I've played 25 to 30 hours of this and I'm nowhere near where I want to be with the game. I haven't completely finished it, I've gotten very far into it, but there's still a lot left for me to do. There's a lot of different jobs or classes and different characters to play around with. All of this stuff is really good. Continuing on from that line of challenging combat, battles actually feel like they have stakes, like due to the way that characters can be perma-lost if you're not careful. Characters have LP or life points, and every time they get taken down, they lose one of those life points. And so if they lose all of them, they're gone forever. You don't get them back. The battles, even though this is a thing, still feel consumable though, because HP restores after each battle, so as long as you're able to tackle one battle within any given area, you're probably going to be able to take on a majority of them too. Of course, this is even more exemplified in the boss fights, and the boss fights actually scale in a very intelligent way, because the more heroes you take down, or the more territories you take over as the Emperor of the Kingdom of Avalon, you'll get more scaling difficulty as you go on. So a pre-warning, if you will, is you're gonna want to grind in this game. If you enjoy grinding, this is a game for you, because it is going to be something you're going to need to do if you want to be able to keep on top of the challenge as it presents itself. As such, SaGa is very much an RPG that puts its gameplay first rather than its storytelling, which I think is going to be very appealing to certain JRPG demographics, but maybe not so much others. And this is where I start to take issues with Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven. It actually has a really engaging story to begin with when you play as Leon, the first emperor you play as of Avalon, come across the tragedy that befalls Avalon at the hands of Kazinsi, one of the 7 heroes. And then you kind of don't really hear anything about it again for maybe like 20, 25 hours, instead spending time expanding the empire through main quests that kind of feel like side quests and therefore feel like mandatory side quests, which is a little bit weird. And the primary kind of function of Romancing Saga is the lineage mechanic. So after important events, you'll get a time skip, which sometimes, in my opinion, come at really inconvenient times, and the first time it happened, I was genuinely quite shocked by it, having not really played the original Romancing Saga. And then you just play as a brand new emperor, no idea like who they are, where they come from, and your characters have to be rebuilt from scratch using inherited skills and all sorts of different ways and mechanics. It's a little overwhelming, and the fact that it came at just times I wasn't expecting, I got more used to it as time went on, but I never looked forward to a time skip, which I think is a bit of a misnomer. And because of this, you don't really get attached to any characters in the game. They don't stick around for long enough for you to really be attached to them. In fact, the story got a bit weird for me at one point where I was in the middle of one quest where I had to infiltrate a castle, and a character that I'd spoken to, a thief, was going to lead the way for me to get in there. I went off and then did something else, and then a time skip happened, which is a 100-year time skip. And then I'd come back to the first quest as a completely different character, but everyone seems to know exactly what's going on, and it was just carrying on as normal. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand that this is a remake of a Super Nintendo game, but it still felt weird. The story is more focused on the 7 heroes themselves and how they got to where they are currently. And you find these in kind of piecemeal sections whilst dungeon crawling, essentially, and you find artifacts that show you a little bit of history as to what happened to the characters. And these bits are really cool, but because they're so few and far between, I found it a little hard to get invested in the story. And there is one other aspect that I didn't love about Romancing Saga 2, despite all the things I really did enjoy about progression and combat in the game, which I think is the biggest highlight it has, and that's learning skills. Learning skills is done randomly. It feels like you have a light bulb icon that appears next to your attacks as you learn them that signify whether you can learn a new skill if you use it. And if you use it, there's a chance that you'll instead do a different skill entirely, and that feels a bit clunky to me. Like, you're ending up having to just grind against certain enemies on the chance that you get to learn a new skill to use against the boss within that dungeon or story segment. Being brutally honest, I've never blown hot and cold with a game quite like I have with Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven. There were times where I was really into it. The beginning of the game, when I came across some of the heroes, absolutely enamored with it. And when I did get into the meat of the combat and really sort of like found a party that I really liked, because there are a lot of jobs and character types that you can enlist into your party over the course of the game, I just found that I really liked experimenting with what was going on. It was very akin to like Final Fantasy V's job system, and the joy I got from that and inheriting different skills and different characters was really cool. But there were other times where I was kind of bored because I'm like, okay, well, I've kind of done this now. I've done a lot of this. And now you're making me go all over again because of a time skip. And then I have to wait an hour or two before I'm like, okay, now I'm really invested again. And because the character design is quite repetitious, like if you've seen one thief, you've seen them all. If you've seen one mage, you've seen them all. It's kind of just a bit disjointed. But the parts of the game I really like. Bottom line though, do I like Romancing Saga 2? Yes, I do. I do want to finish the campaign and probably return back to it for a harder playthrough as well, because it appeals to the parts of JRPGs that I really like. As somebody who is not as invested in sort of lore and things like that as I am with good game mechanics, I really enjoyed the parts of Romancing Saga 2 that appeal to that. The combat is fantastic, it's very engaging, it's challenging, the boss fights are brilliant. As a matter of fact, there was one boss that I was stuck on for a good 2 hours, but I really liked it because it made me really think outside the box and how I needed to tackle that. So yeah, I do want to go back to this and continue to play it as well. So I would recommend it to RPG fans who are gameplay first, story secondary, like me perhaps. However, I do think that it's maybe an acquired taste for everybody, and when you're releasing next to the likes of Metaphor ReFantazio, and then we've got Dragon Quest III HD coming up, it may not be a priority for some JRPG players. But I think if you try it, you'll be pleasantly surprised. And with that, I just want to extend a massive thank you to Square Enix for letting me play Revenge of the Seven early so that I could bring this review to you guys. And I'd like to hear from you as well. What do you think of Romancing Saga 2? Is it something that you're going to purchase when it releases? Is it something that you think you'll go back to repeatedly? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're not sure what to comment, then just type the word algorithm, because it's really helpful to me as a content creator to get any kind of engagement. So thank you in advance if you do. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, then perhaps consider liking the video or giving the channel a subscribe. It's massively appreciated. As somebody who is always trying to better himself as a content creator, I thank you very much in advance. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then I have two methods for you. You can either join up on my Patreon page, as all the lovely people that have done so previously have, and I'm massively grateful to you guys for that, or you can check out my Etsy store in the description box below, where I sell art prints for various different drawings and paintings that I've done previously. So thank you very much for that, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye bye.